again, I'm Glenn Hollister from ZS. For those of you who don't know ZS, we're a consulting firm. I lead the travel practice. And so as a consulting firm, I don't have a product to demo. Sorry, no product demos here. What I want to do is talk to you about artificial intelligence, or AI. And if you read the popular news, if you're on Facebook at all, I'm sure you've heard of AI, right? Just in the last week, there's been a couple of big events, right? One is Google's new duplex technology that they're deploying on Google Assistant. And the other you may have seen was this video from Boston Dynamics that went viral of their humanoid robot running across a field, right? Both applications of AI that have really captured the public's imagination. Now, like any technology, AI is getting a lot of hype. And there's always a question with a new technology like this. Is this real or is it a fad? So I'd love to get your feeling on where you stand on that. Who thinks that AI is the next big technology, or at least a big technology? Raise your hands. Free. Okay. Now, who is in the camp that AI is a fad and in a year or two we may never hear it? Who's there? No doubters at all. Okay. Well, that makes my job a little easier. I'm going to talk about why AI is happening now and how you can think about bringing it into your organization. Okay, so now if you read the travel industry press at all, you've seen a lot about AI. These are all actual headlines from a variety of media sources that cover the travel industry within just the last 3 or 4 months. And I'll give you a moment to read a few of these. Okay. A couple of my favorites. The best funded AI company in the world is now delivering results for OTAs. And Amex buys Mezi, that's an AI company, and embraces do-it-for-me model. Right? So we're seeing AI becoming pervasive around the travel industry, right? Hotels, cruise lines, casinos, travel insurers, review sites. All these companies are bringing AI into their business. And so one thing you should understand, right, is we've gone past the point where AI is an interesting thing to talk about. We're in the phase now where businesses are actively putting AI to work in their enterprise and changing the way their business works. Now, if we look at the airline industry, and here's some more recent headlines. Things are a little different. I'll let you read these for a moment, and we'll talk about that. So KLM says, chatbots are the future of customer support. United now lets you check in and get flight status with Amazon Alexa. Right? If those seem somewhat less amazing than some of the things you saw on the previous page or what Google and Boston Dynamics are doing, you're right. And that, I think, is broadly what's going on in the airline industry is we're moving more slowly into AI than other industries. And there's some very good reasons for that. And a lot of the previous speakers have talked about, this kind of huge legacy technology stack that we're working with, the vast amounts of data, the very complicated processes. That all makes AI harder for us to adopt than an OTA that started business 10 years ago and is sitting all on modern technology, for sure. But it doesn't mean that we can't do it. We'll talk a bit about that. Well, also, the other thing that I want to mention is you have to be careful going this. I'll tell a story a little later on about an airline that went too fast, and so there's a measured way to move into AI. Okay, now I want to, before I get into that, I want to talk a bit about what is AI. And I don't want to describe artificial neural networks or tensors or anything. I just want to think about 3 basic functions that AI performs. The first of which is cognition, or is perception, right? Just the ability to take information in and make sense of it. So when you talk to Siri or you talk to Alexa, that is a form of perception, right? Natural language recognition and processing. Machine vision is another example. The second function that AI performs is cognition. And cognition is the ability to come to a conclusion or make a decision based on information. So some of the things you'll hear there are things such as deep learning, machine learning, reinforcement, training. Those are all areas of cognition within AI. And the last and most important is action, right? The ability to do something, whether that's through a chatbot, a recommendation engine, text-to-speech generation, all those things. And if you've seen the video on Google Duplex, and if you haven't, I urge you to go see it. It's only about 4 minutes long. Just Google Duplex, and they give this very nice demonstration of all three phases, where someone asks Google Assistant, book me a hair appointment. And Google figures out what it is that you want to do, and then Google calls the hair salon, the human answers, and it books you the appointment. And then it tells you what appointment was booked, right? So that's all three phases, all three functions of AI happening in the space of just a couple minutes. Okay, so why is AI happening now? It's really a convergence of factors both in the general economy and within our industry. Okay, now the three that are in the general economy, they're actually the same three factors that Andres mentioned in his opening keynote yesterday morning. I'll touch on them quickly. First of all, algorithms, right? The actual computation that happens within the AI itself. The second is the flow and velocity and ability to process and use large amounts of data. And the third is technology. And technology, not just hardware that runs an AI algorithm faster, but all the things that are happening in technology, things that generate new sources of data, like the Internet of Things, robotic process automation, and new technology that helps us use and take advantage of that information, like the cloud and blockchain. So all those things coming together are what in general is enabling AI. And why is this a great time for airlines? And why are so many looking at it? Three things. First, that many people have talked about, NDC. What NDC does is two things. First, it gives us richer data upon which to act. And second, most important, it gives us a channel for action in the indirect channel, right? Without NDC or something similar, we can only really take advantage of AI from an action standpoint within the airline or on our direct channels. Okay? The second thing is competition, right? And for many years in the airline industry, our competition has primarily been based on network and price. And while that's certainly still true, we have many more overlapping routes and possibilities for travelers today than we used to. And so service is becoming a key aspect of competition in the airline industry in ways that have not historically been true. And AI provides a great way to differentiate your airline on service. And finally, profitability, right? As an industry, we are being more consistently profitable. And instead of, I've been in the industry a couple decades now, and much of that time, many airlines have been focusing on either reacting to various demand shocks or just trying to survive, right? And while there's certainly some airlines that are certainly in those cases, many airlines are now in a place where they can actually look and say, what should we do better? What should we do different, right? So we have the opportunity now to take advantage of all those things happening on the enabler side and bring AI into the enterprise. But as we do so, we need to be somewhat careful. I want to, I mentioned before a story that's maybe not so good. And this is a client of mine a couple of years ago undertook a large project. And I'm not going to name the airline. I'm just going to call them Airline X for reasons that'll be apparent. So Airline X looked and said, hey, personalization is the next big thing. And we have all this data sitting in our enterprise we're not using. Right? We have a bunch of reservations data we don't really use. We have loyalty data. We have survey data. We have other things. And we want to personalize offers, and we want to personalize the messaging around the offer. And we want to personalize the channel the offer is delivered in. And so they undertook this large project, spent millions of dollars. And about 18 months in, they looked at where they were and where they were headed, and they said, we are not on track to get anywhere that we want to end up. And they pulled the plug on the project. Right? So why is that? I'll give you a framework to think about. Okay, so I'm a consultant. I've got to have my 2x2 framework. For all of you who've been to a business school, here's one for today. Existing data to new data. Existing processes to new processes. So you put any possible AI application you would use into this for, and we start off in the lower left corner. Existing processes and data, we call that automate. If I add new data to that process, I call that augment. If I keep the existing data but I change the process, we call that disrupt. And then if I'm trying to do everything new, we call invent. Right? So what was one of the things that Airline X made a mistake with is they jumped right into the invent category. Right? They hadn't built a lot of capability with AI and the other technologies they were using, and they went right to invent, and they took on a big, huge project all at once. And one of the things we've found is that, first of all, you want a portfolio of smaller opportunities in all four of these areas. You want to be thoughtful about which ones you go after first and which ones you go after later. So what does an example look like of kind of a right-sized project? The example I'll use is facial recognition. Airlines are using facial recognition in a number of ways, but one airline that's gotten really some very nice press recently about this is Lufthansa. And if you haven't seen the article, Lufthansa put biometric boarding gates in at LAX a few months ago. The way these gates work, if you haven't seen, is you walk up, you put your passport down, it scans your face, it says, is the face I just scanned the same as the one in the passport? If it's a match, the door opens, it lets you through. Okay, so pretty simple, right? So existing boarding process, basically existing data in the passport, right? What are the results? Well, from the airline standpoint, I don't have to have staff standing there checking passports. My staff is freed up to focus on exceptions and people with special needs. From the passenger point of view, cut the boarding time for an A380 from 40 minutes to 20 minutes. And obviously the government looks at this and says, hey, this is a much more secure check than a human trying to match up pictures, right? So kind of a win-win-win. That's a good example of what might an early AI effort look like. Okay, so for the rest of the time here, I just want to walk through each of these areas and give you one example to kind of get your juices flowing. Now, each of these slides shows several other examples. I'm going to talk about the one in the center. But the idea is, again, you should start thinking about what is a portfolio of projects or opportunities you have to bring AI into your organization, into your enterprise. Okay? So the first one I'll talk about here, something probably all of us do, we forecast no-show rates. Most of us are probably doing this based on historical trending of no-show rate for that flight on that day. What if we take all the other data we already have in our system? What booking class? How many days out was it purchased? What was the price paid? What was the channel it was purchased through? And use all that to create a richer forecast about the no-show rates and use that to optimize our overbooking. Okay, next category, augment. Now again, augment is about new data. And I'll give you 3 categories of new data, right? The first is new data in terms of we already have it in the enterprise, but we aren't using it, right? That's the Airline X example. All this data is sitting in our data warehouse, let's use it. The second kind of new data is data that exists outside the enterprise, we need to bring it in. And then the third kind of new data is data that does not exist. We have to create a process to capture data in the first place before we can use it. Right, so this example is the second kind. Data is sitting out there on the internet about many different kinds of events and other things going on. We could use robotic process automation to easily bring that data in and create forecast influences automatically, right? So today we probably do this for seasonality. We may do it for large events like a Super Bowl or a World Cup. But if you think about automating it, think about the level of detail you could get down to with your forecast influences, right? Much, much more granular detail. Okay. Talking about disrupt, okay? And in disrupt, there's a key thing we found with projects in the disrupt category, and that is change management. If I refer back to what Jim Collins and several other speakers talked about in terms of the people aspect of how do we bring technology in, right? When you do a project in the disrupt category, change management is really important. So again, we're talking about our existing data, but we're changing our process. Why is it important? And it has to do with what several other speakers referred to as the black box. Okay, so what is the black box in AI? So the way AI works is we know the inputs we put in, we know the outputs we get out. We cannot explain how the AI gets from the inputs to the outputs. Okay, that's the black box. Now, if it's a relatively simple problem, we can use our intuition, and we probably understand how the AI got from the inputs to the outputs. But as I add more data, and the problem becomes more complex, and the AI becomes more sophisticated, it becomes nearly impossible to understand why the AI came to the conclusion it did, right? So now think about this black box phenomenon when you put it into a process where people have been working a certain way for a long time. And you say, hey, we want you to work different. Here's the recommendation about how you work different. And by the way, we can't explain to you why that's the recommendation. Okay, that's a difficult change management problem. So when you take on things in this area, make sure you put proper effort against the people side of this and the change management aspect. Okay, now the example here, probably near and dear to many of us, right? So most revenue analysts in our experience spend 60 to 70% of their day following some sort of routine or checklist where they are reactive to whatever they see. And what we're suggesting is you can use personalized analytics. And I say, I know this analyst's area of responsibility. And the AI is going to look at everything in their area of responsibility and say, hey, the most important thing for you to look at is this, because the AI thinks that has the most potential revenue impact. So look at this first, then look at this, then look at this. And if you don't get to all this stuff on your routine, don't worry about it, because we're confident we've hit the most important stuff. Right? So changing the core work that we do from that very routine, reactive into a proactive. Last example here, under invent. Now, what we work with our clients with in this space is when you go to invent, don't look just at AI. Look at all these other enabling technologies that are out there, right? And one of those is blockchain. So if you're not familiar with blockchain, it's the technology behind cryptocurrency, but it can be used for many other things. And all a blockchain is a distributed database that allows two or more parties to see the same transaction in a way that neither party can deny or change what that transaction is. Okay? So now think about all the personalization we've been talking about, right? Personalized offers and personalized pricing and personalized display. Part of that could be personalized fare rules, right? I could develop a fare rule for each individual who comes shopping to my airline. Now, of course, if you think about that in today's world, right, boy, that would be a nightmare. How many fare rules do I have to file? How do I do my revenue auditing, right? That would be really hard. But if I take those fare rules and I distribute them by blockchain, now I can automate the process of complying with fare rules and seeing who has not, right? So that's an example of taking AI to generate fare rules and another technology to solve the other problems that level of personalization creates. Again, a little out there, but an example of what you can do when you start pulling things together. Okay. So to wrap up, again, we have these 4 areas. And if you take nothing else away, I want you to take away the idea of these 4 areas and that you need to build a portfolio of ideas and projects in here and have a deliberate way that you move through that portfolio as you gain experience and capability. Okay, and that is it. Thank you very much for your attention today.